I never thought I'd be telling this story, let alone living it. But sometimes, life throws you into situations that feel more like a movie than real life. I was just an ordinary woman trying to make my way in the world, focused on my job, my goals, and just keeping my head down. I worked hard, showed up on time, and trusted the people around me, especially my boss. He was supposed to be someone I could rely on, someone who had my back. That's what bosses are meant to do, right? Look out for their team. Protect them. Guide them. But instead, he blurred the lines, and then crossed them entirely. It started off so subtle, I didn't even realize what was happening. A compliment here, an extra coffee brought to my desk, an offer to stay late and help me finish reports. At first, I appreciated it. I thought he was just being kind, maybe even recognizing my hard work. But over time, things changed. The way he looked at me started to feel different. Not just professional, but personal. And then it turned confusing. He would text me outside of work hours, nothing inappropriate at first, just checking in or asking how my evening was going. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe he was just a caring person. But then, I found out he was married. And not just married, married with kids. That's when my stomach dropped. Everything suddenly felt wrong. I started to pull back, trying to create space, but he noticed. He wasn't happy about it. His kindness started turning into pressure. It was like he felt entitled to my attention. And when I didn't give it the way he wanted, things began to shift at work too. He started criticizing my work more, becoming distant in front of others, but overly friendly when no one was around. It was a constant emotional tug-of-war. I felt stuck, torn between protecting my job and protecting myself. And even worse, I felt ashamed. Like maybe I had done something to invite this. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. I had never led him on. I was just a young woman trying to do her job and stay professional. But when someone in power decides to use that power for their own selfish desires, it can leave you questioning everything, especially yourself. And just when I thought things couldn't get any more twisted, something happened that changed everything. One moment, one decision, and suddenly, his secret wasn't a secret anymore. My world flipped upside down, and I had no choice but to face the truth about who he really was, and what he was willing to risk to keep his double life going. But that's where the story really begins. Looking back, I can see the signs more clearly now. But at the time, I was just trying to keep my job and not rock the boat. I worked in a mid-sized marketing firm, and my boss, let's call him Mark, was well respected. Everyone thought he was this family man who worked hard and took care of his team. He always mentioned his wife in passing, talked about his kids like any proud father would, and for the most part, kept things professional in front of everyone else. But behind closed doors, he was someone completely different. When I first started, Mark made me feel welcome. He offered to mentor me, help me grow in the company. I thought I was lucky. He praised my ideas during meetings, even gave me credit when the team landed a big client. But slowly, he started pulling me into more one-on-one meetings. He'd ask about my weekend plans, compliment how I looked, and laugh a little too long at my jokes. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe he was just being friendly. But it got harder to ignore the way his gaze lingered a little too long or how his texts at night started getting personal, sometimes about his unhappy marriage, other times about how different I was. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose my job, and I definitely didn't want drama. I kept things polite but distant. I thought maybe he'd get the hint. But the more I pulled away, the more he tried to draw me in. He started offering me special projects and saying things like, "I trust you more than anyone else here." At first, I felt flattered. Then I felt uncomfortable. Then I felt trapped. Things really shifted the night of the company retreat. It was supposed to be a team-building event, just drinks, dinner, and bonding. But after a few too many drinks, Mark cornered me when most people had already left. He said things that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just blurring the line anymore. He was stepping right over it. I managed to leave before it went any further, but the damage was done. After that night, I couldn't unsee who he really was. The next day at work, he acted like nothing happened. Smiling, joking, like we shared some harmless little moment. But I knew better. What I didn't know was that someone else had seen us that night. Someone who would soon turn the entire situation on its head. I found out about the witness 2 days later. Her name was Jenna, a junior designer who'd started a few months before me. Quiet, observant, always kept to herself. I never thought she noticed anything going on between me and Mark. But she did. She pulled me aside in the break room, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw him follow you out the other night," she said. "And I saw how he looked at you. I just want you to know, you're not imagining things." For a second, I felt this strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone else had seen it, that I wasn't losing my mind. But also fear, because now it wasn't just between me and him. Someone else knew, and that made everything more real. I asked Jenna not to say anything, and she promised she wouldn't. Still, just knowing she'd witnessed that moment made me feel exposed. Like a secret I'd been trying to bury had suddenly cracked open. Meanwhile, Mark started acting even more unpredictable. Some days, he'd ignore me completely in the office. Other days, he'd send me long texts at night, rambling about how misunderstood he felt, how lonely he was in his marriage, how he believed I understood him better than anyone. I never responded to those messages, but the pressure kept building. Every time my phone lit up with his name, I felt sick. To make matters worse, work started feeling like a minefield. Rumors began to spread, nothing specific, just whispers that something was off between me and the boss. I could feel people watching me differently, like they were trying to piece together a puzzle without knowing all the parts. I even overheard someone joking that I must be getting promoted soon, considering how much time I spent in Mark's office. That hurt more than I expected. The most twisted part? Mark seemed completely unfazed by it all. He acted like everything was perfectly normal, like we were both in on some secret no one else understood. But I wasn't playing along. I was just trying to survive the day without falling apart. And Jenna, well, she became the only person I could trust. But even that wasn't safe for long. Because soon, I'd find out that Jenna wasn't the only one watching. Someone else had seen much more than I realized, and they weren't planning to stay silent. I thought I was holding it together, but the cracks were starting to show. I was constantly anxious, jumping at every ping on my phone, dreading every conversation with Mark. I started coming in early just to avoid crossing paths with him in the hallway. I'd take my lunch outside, alone, just to breathe. But the worst part was pretending like everything was fine, like I wasn't caught in a quiet nightmare that no one else could really see. Then one Monday morning, everything changed. There was a buzz in the office, the kind that spreads fast but no one wants to talk about out loud. People were glued to their screens, whispering, exchanging looks. I noticed Jenna staring at her phone, her expression pale. I asked her what was going on, and all she said was, "You need to see this." It was a post on a local community forum, anonymous, but detailed. Someone had written about a married executive at a marketing firm who was abusing his position to pursue someone much younger on his team. It didn't name names, but the details were way too close to be coincidence. The retreat. The texts. The late meetings. It was all there. I felt my stomach twist. I knew this wasn't just gossip, it was about me. About us. Someone had seen more than I thought, and now it was out in the open. My hands were shaking. My heart wouldn't slow down. I kept thinking, was it Jenna? Did she post it? But her face said otherwise, she looked just as shocked as I was. Mark came into the office late that day. And when he did, the shift in energy was immediate. No one looked him in the eye. No one spoke. He could feel it. He walked past my desk without a word, but I could see it in his face, he knew. The secret was unraveling, and there was no controlling it now. Later that afternoon, I got called into HR. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to expect. Was I in trouble? Was this finally going to turn into something official? On my way there, Jenna caught my arm and whispered, "Be careful. He's not going down quietly." That's when I realized, this wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. And the person I once trusted the most was about to show just how far he'd go to protect his image. The moment I stepped into the HR office, I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just my imagination, something serious was unfolding, and I was right in the middle of it. The HR manager, Lisa, didn't waste time with small talk. Her tone was calm, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She asked me if I was comfortable, if I needed someone else present. That's when I really knew, it was bigger than I thought. She slid a printed copy of the anonymous post across the table and asked me point blank, "Is this about Mark?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to avoid the mess. But I was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending. So I nodded. Then came the second blow. Lisa leaned in slightly and said, "You should know, you're not the only one who's come forward." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "There's another employee," she said. "We received a report over the weekend. Similar complaints, same kind of behavior." She didn't give a name, but the description, it lines up with you. She said she saw what happened at the retreat too. But what she added, it's something we didn't expect. That's when my heart started racing. Lisa continued, "She claimed that Mark had done this before. Not just with you, not just once. There's a pattern. And this time, there might be proof." I felt the floor drop beneath me. I thought I was dealing with a one-time betrayal, a one-off situation that spiraled out of control. But now, there was another woman. Another story. And possibly evidence that Mark had been doing this long before I ever stepped into the office. I walked out of that meeting in a daze. My head was spinning. Every memory I had of Mark now felt like part of something calculated. Not just an inappropriate relationship, but a repeated abuse of power. It made my stomach turn. I thought I was alone in this. I thought it was something I had to carry by myself. But now, I realized I was part of a much bigger picture, and I had no idea how deep it went. Later that evening, Jenna called me. Her voice was shaky. "I think you need to see something," she said. I didn't know if I should say anything before, but now. "I think it matters." She sent me a photo of blurry, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. It was Mark, sitting at an outdoor cafe. Across from him was a young woman who clearly didn't work at our company. They were sitting close, too close. The timestamp? 2 weeks before our company retreat. The pieces were starting to come together. This wasn't just a workplace issue anymore. It was a pattern of manipulation and deceit that stretched beyond office walls. And now, with multiple people involved, the story was no longer just mine. But the more that surfaced, the more dangerous it felt to speak out. Because someone like Mark, someone who's built a perfect image and has everything to lose, doesn't just walk away quietly. The next few days felt like walking through a storm. HR launched a formal investigation, and people around the office started noticing. The atmosphere changed. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Some people avoided eye contact, while others gave me these quiet looks of sympathy, like they knew, even if they didn't say it out loud. I kept my head down, trying to focus, but I could feel the pressure building. Then, one morning, Mark didn't show up to work. No explanation. No message. His office door stayed shut. By noon, HR sent out a company-wide email saying Mark had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It just felt like the beginning of something bigger. Later that afternoon, Lisa from HR called me in again. This time, she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was someone from corporate legal. They had reviewed Jenna's photo, cross-checked dates, and matched it with an earlier complaint that had been quietly buried a year before, another woman, from another branch, with nearly the same story. But what really changed everything was the video. It turned out that the cafe where Jenna took the photo had security cameras. And someone anonymously turned in a copy of the footage. It showed Mark clearly, sitting with the young woman, leaning in, touching her hand. It was undeniable. Combined with the internal complaints, it was enough. Corporate moved fast. He was terminated by the end of the week. I should have felt relief, but part of me still felt raw. I hadn't just lost my peace of mind, I'd lost trust. I had gone to work every day thinking I was safe, thinking I was being mentored, not manipulated. And I wasn't the only one. But just when I thought the storm had finally passed, the final twist hit me. The anonymous tip that led to the cafe footage? It didn't come from Jenna. And it wasn't the other woman from HR. It came from Mark's own wife. She had found messages on his phone, things he hadn't deleted, screenshots he had saved, photos. She'd been putting the pieces together quietly, tracking him, collecting evidence. She was the one who found the video. And instead of confronting him directly, she went through the company. She'd known something was wrong for a while, but never imagined it ran this deep. Her anonymous submission was her way of exposing the truth without putting herself or their children in the spotlight. And just like that, the story came full circle. The man who built his entire image on power and control was brought down by the people he underestimated most. By the women he tried to silence. By the wife he thought would never look beyond the surface. In the end, he wasn't just exposed, he was erased. And while healing doesn't happen overnight, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time: control over my own story. After everything came out, things slowly started to settle. The company released a statement about taking workplace misconduct seriously, and they promised to implement stricter policies moving forward. Honestly, it felt a bit like damage control, but I guess it was something. Mark's name was no longer mentioned. His office was cleared out overnight, like he'd never existed. But those of us who'd lived through it couldn't forget so easily. Jenna and I grew closer after that. She told me she almost didn't say anything at all, that she worried no one would believe her, or worse, that it would all fall back on her. But in the end, she chose to speak up. And because of her, I found the courage to speak up too. The other woman who had reported Mark earlier eventually reached out to me. We met for coffee, and talking to her helped me process so much. She was brave, and hearing her story reminded me just how deep these kinds of situations can go, and how often they stay buried. As for Mark's wife, I never heard from her directly. But I think about her sometimes. The strength it must have taken to gather the truth, to come forward quietly, and to walk away from a man who had lied so deeply. I respect her more than she'll ever know. She didn't just save herself, she helped protect others, too. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel a little more like myself again. I focused on my work, but I also gave myself space to heal. I saw a counselor. I took long walks. I started journaling, writing everything down so I could finally let some of it go. And I realized something: I hadn't done anything wrong. None of us had. What happened was a result of someone abusing their power, twisting trust into something it was never meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped blaming myself. This whole experience changed how I see things. I learned that speaking up isn't about creating drama, it's about protecting yourself and others. I learned that silence only protects the people who do harm. And most of all, I learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about facing the truth, and then moving forward with it. Now, when I walk into work, I carry myself a little differently. Not with fear, but with clarity. With boundaries. With confidence that I didn't have before. And if anyone ever finds themselves in a situation like I did, I want them to know, you're not alone. Your voice matters. And even when it feels like the world is stacked against you, the truth has a way of finding its way out. That chapter of my life is closed now. But the lesson will stay with me forever. Not just about infidelity or betrayal, but about strength, survival, and standing up for yourself when it matters most. 14.